My name is Emmett Theophilus Caviness. E. Theophilus Caviness is the signator. And I was born in Marshall, Texas, 1928. So at present, I am 96 years old. I met Dr. King in 1956. I was in East St. Louis, Illinois, pastoring the St. Paul Baptist Church. And we were in quest of a minority representative on the city council. The population was about half and half, Caucasian, African American, and there was no presence in the city government on the city council. And I was very conscious of that, and I needed some national support to try to help us. And so I called Dr. King in Montgomery, Alabama, and he got back with me and said, I was asking him if he would come and help us. And I designated a time when he could come, and unfortunately he said he couldn't make it. I asked him if he could get Caviness, and he could not get that done, so ultimately we decided to get his wife. So Coretta Scott King, back in 1955, came to our city, gave a concert helping us to try to get representation on the city council. So it was there that I began a relationship with him and his family. When I came to Cleveland, fortunately, some of his family were members of our church. Jasper Scott was Coretta Scott's uncle, and A.D. King, Martin King's brother, wife's mother, was a member of our gospel choir. And so we had a great number of kings that were affiliated with the Great Abyssinia at that time. Martin understood the topography of this country. He knew that we could never win a battle with violence. He knew the odds were against you. So he was dedicated to Mahatma Gandhi's nonviolent theology and philosophy. And so he was determined to have all of us to understand that the only way that we could really succeed in civil rights and ideas relative to justice and equality was through nonviolent means. In 1965, it was March 23rd, I remember as if it were yesterday, March 23rd, he came, we were giving him a dinner because he had just won the Nobel Peace Prize. And we'd given him a dinner. And he left the Selma March and came to Cleveland. Legs were swollen, foot was swollen, but he came here anyway. While he came, throngs of people accompanied him. In fact, on a Wednesday evening at Corey Methodist Church, March 23rd, 1965, Martin came down 105. There were approximately 6,000 people who were right behind him. He was enthralled by this magnanimity of people who were supporting him. And we were in Corey Methodist Church, which at the time seated 3,000 people. There were about 3,000 people on the outside. So Martin and I were sitting in the pulpit, and Martin says to me, he said, Caviness, would you mind opening your church so that we can accommodate many of the people outside, more than they were inside? I said, I'd be more than happy to. So I went out the back door, went over to Great Abyssinia, and we opened the church up. Within 15 minutes, 1,200 people were assembled at our church. And Martin spoke eloquently to civil rights and black folks being accountable. And at the time, black kids were kind of burning down cities. And Martin was trying to tell them that you shouldn't burn, but you should learn. In fact, he came to Glenville High School and he spoke that same message. But anyway, he came and spoke to our church that night. Immediately upon his conclusion, we had already organized a civil rights committee, and we had raised money on that Sunday morning to give to him. So we gave him a massive amount of money that night, something like $6,000. And he was very thrilled by that, because at that time, not many people understood or wanted to follow Dr. Martin, right, Dr. King. Right now you have throngs of people who said, I'm a king person. But back then the line was very short because people were not committed to that. In fact, he had just left Chicago, where some of the ministers were associated with Mayor Daley, and they had told him not to come to Chicago. And there were folks here who were not quite ready for him. In fact, the mayor called him an extremist. Mayor Loca called him an extremist. So Martin was dedicated to coming here and making sure that people would be informed on what was going on, and more than anything else, seek to secure the rights, the right to vote. And that was his major emphasis during that time, telling us to vote and to also tell the kids to learn, learn, learn. Martin would have the young people to know that you need to be a part of this. It's your future. It's what you need to be aligned with. And I would think that a message that he gave at that time is so relevant even today, that young people must dedicate themselves to the struggle, that the struggle continues, and that if there ever were a time when racism reigns, sexism reigns, that's right now. And we should be dedicated and devoted to make sure that we contribute our individual efforts and collective efforts toward eliminating that and obliterating it. Martin was supposed to come back to Cleveland prior to the March for Economic Rights, and he was assassinated, you remember. He would teach us that economics is so important. In fact, if you were able to go to a restaurant and you have civil rights ability to do that and rights to accommodate it, if you did not have money, you still couldn't go. So basically, he was coming back to Cleveland to talk about the battle against poverty and how economics was so intertwined and related to where we are. In fact, I said, my message to you and to all of Americans, to African Americans in particular, that you need economic rights. You need silver, S-I-L-V-E-R rights, not only civil rights, but you need silver rights, which means we need to focus on economics. And I think that was the last quest that Martin really understood. In fact, I think one time he mused to someone, I think I've misled my people. I've taught them about civil rights, but I have not taught them enough about economic rights. And his last movement was supposed to be that of eliminating poverty and lifting up economic rights. I was fascinated by the SCLC because it was the strongest civil rights organization at the time, and I was dedicated to being a part of that. So in Nashville, Tennessee, when the national board met, they put me on the board. So I became a dedicated supporter and the leader for the SCLC in Cleveland, Ohio. So I've been president of the Cleveland chapter of Southern Christian Leadership Conference for 18 years. So I've tried to really promote Dr. King's efforts to enhance his magnanimity with regard to his support for civil rights and economic rights. And so having been a part of that, it's just been a thrill of my lifetime to say that I knew the man, what a great, phenomenal individual he was, and how I have striven in my life to keep the movement going. And to understand it at this very critical time. History is very, very important. In fact, if you don't really recognize it and understand it, you're destined to repeat it. So I know that if you're not dedicated to something, if you're not devoted to it, in fact, Martin said, if you don't have something that you're willing to die for, you're not really ready to live. So in living an abundant life, you engage in those things that you need to engage in to enhance not only the African American community, but the community of the world. In fact, Martin embraced the beloved community, which means you reach across ethnicity. You don't view people for the color of their skin, the content of their character, more importantly. That was his whole idea of making sure that people would come together and, as he said, become a beloved community.